Welcome to Block by Block, where we dive into topics at the intersection of crypto, tech, and society. I'm your host, Denelle Dixon, CEO and Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation. Join me as I sit down with a different expert each episode for a conversation on how crypto and blockchain are shaping their corner of the world. For our third season, we're taking a mini-series approach to explore the components necessary to bring real-world impacts through thoughtful conversation with leaders. Our first three-part mini-series will break down block by block this idea of how to bring real-world impact by leveraging new technologies and challenging the status quo. We're kicking off the season with Rick Martin. He's a co-founder of Decaf. Rick and the Decaf team have built a non-custodial wallet providing seamless entry into decentralized finance with easy on and off ramping between fiat and crypto in nearly 200 countries. We're going to dig into how Decaf is making crypto work for people in their everyday lives in ways traditional financial services just can't. In our conversation, Rick will get us thinking about how we build real-world impact. First, from a builder's perspective, because that's where Rick sits, and how important it is to build trust with users. And that trust can come from a lot of places, but the UX and design are sort of essential to making that happen. And he'll shine a light on how empowering it can feel for new users who've never had financial access before to feel like they're part of progress, innovative progress, and to have an application where they get to use the latest technology. And finally, he'll share with us how important the narrative is when you make people see the real world impact, and that we have an important role to be the voice for those people who don't have a seat at the table. So in addition to the outstanding work at Decaf, Rick was previously named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. He was a cadet officer in the Army Reserves at Australian Defence Force, attended MIT for New Venture Leadership, and has a BA and law degree from the University of Wollongong. Currently, he lives in Mexico City and overall has been a great partner for Stellar and the SDF. So let's get into the conversation. Well, hello, Rick, welcome, and thank you for joining us for our first episode of season 3 for Block by Block. But it's also our first episode of our mini series on highlighting the real world impacts of a more inclusive blockchain financial system. And who better to have than you?
Thanks for having me, Denelle. I'm excited to get the conversation started.
Awesome. All right. So we've worked closely together over the years, and I'm excited to have you here to share all that you and your team have been working on at Decaf and the driving that you're doing with respect to real world impact. In the intro, I talked a little bit about what Decaf does, but before we get into the specifics, I would love for you to share the backstory on the name, Decaf, because it really illustrates the focus of that real world impact. So can you do that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea kind of came in a hackathon, and it was based on essentially lived experience. We wanted to have a better payment system using blockchain. So the whole idea was a decentralized way to buy coffee or cafe in Latin America. Spanish cafe is coffee. So yeah, decentralized cafe. Like, can we buy things like a coffee with things like blockchain?
And so trying to get a cup of coffee kind of really makes it very real for the average person. But I want to dig into a little of that idea a little bit more. So the why really, really, really matters. And it kind of matters with all technology, but I really feel like it matters with blockchain and with crypto because there's so much out there that it's hard to answer the why you're doing what you're doing. So in this mini series, we're going to be asking all of our guests to sort of share the who. Who are the people that you are seeing and experiencing the real world impact of what you guys are doing at Decaf?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you ask every founder in the team or person, they all have a slightly different story, but a similar mission. So, and I think it just comes down to lived experience. What's your experience? What do you see in the world, and how do you want it to change, or what do you see as a future that maybe other people don't see or you want to create? And for me, it was the reality of going through the pandemic, living in Colombia. That was, for me, just an eye-opening experience. I'd always been in fintech in the past, and I think we talked about that, and looked at FX and was really into, all the fintechs that were emerging for cross-border payments like Wise and Revolutes and, your Monzo banks. But I couldn't even pay someone, delivering me food on Rappi, or I couldn't, send money to a friend who was helping me out for a project, or, and I couldn't do these things living in Colombia, and I couldn't help people, and we couldn't go outside. It was really hard to get cash and things like that. And I just saw a broken payment system. And, it was a big movement in 2021. Like lots of people were looking at crypto. It was starting to gain like popularity and moving up. But, I just looked at the technology and it was really interesting. And I thought, this could actually be used to solve a lot of these payments problems and banking infrastructure in the place that I was living. And I just really felt that no one was really doing it and really focused on it properly. And I just felt that, and I met Fernando at the time, who was also interested in the same things and lived in a small place. Actually, I'm in here now in Xochitepec in Morelos, and there's just so much to be improved. It can go from 0 to 1 to a good financial system. And I think we really wanted to build something that showed that, and that could be used as like for example, a crypto wallet, but used as a banking system or a payment system.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I love the story on how you guys sort of came together from this to be able to build this. There are so many building blocks that you need to put together to get to the place of actual execution of something like this. What were the first ones that you tackled?
So, I mean, the idea started with buying a coffee with crypto, right? And decentralized Decaf. And we just thought like, well, how do you actually do that? And we actually started as building a point of sales for businesses. And then in doing that, we could, for example, get someone with their crypto wallet to just pay for an item. We started actually running the Solana, the stores that they had in Miami and New York, and people could buy things like shirts and drinks and merchandise. And it kind of proved that, wow, you can really do that and get rid of the middlemen and all the fees and transactions and merchandise. But what we realized is, well, one, it's a cool technology in the US, but it's not really saving people's lives or making a huge 100x difference. And the other thing that we found was people still needed wallets to enter the ecosystem, and they also needed ramps. And the current existing solutions were really expensive and really difficult and really crypto native. And so we recognized, well, we had to tackle the problem of the crypto wallet. It is the entry point for everyone. And we just felt that there was no one really focusing on bringing in new users, non-crypto people, non-crypto natives to this ecosystem. So we had to create the Decaf wallet. We felt that we didn't really have a choice. So
you had to like tackle the crypto wallet. One of the things that I feel like when I came into the space, it's been about 5.5 years or so for me, I noticed that there was very little attention to like onboarding users, like bringing users through a journey in a way that we had done pretty well in Web 2, although in the early days we hadn't figured that out either. And so making them feel comfortable using this thing that you want them to call a wallet. Is that like kind of like how you had to approach this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of the dream originally is like, well, most of my life had always been spent in different countries overseas. And I was a big advocate for products like Wise and Revolut and these neobanks because they provide such a good service and were significantly improving the banking experience of people like me who lived or migrants in different countries. And, the idea was, could we replicate this type of user experience with a crypto wallet on blockchain and actually use fundamentally new rails, innovative rails that provide the same type of user experience that these sort of like really forward, innovative neobanks are doing, and that's sort of how we saw we had to do that. Like it just had to be a good experience that everyone was familiar with and a good user experience, but also the ramps played into that as well.
Yeah, I think that's it's so funny because when I think about neobanks, I think them deeply connected into Web3. But really, that was still, they were leveraging the Web 2 way to like engage with consumers that we needed to develop. I used to always say we need more UX designers in Web 3 because we needed to really like bring that whole user experience and the user journey into it. Maybe you've talked a little about this already in terms of like the building something from the outset is super complicated. But is there one challenge, and I'm thinking when you said ramps as being sort of the challenge, but is there a challenge that you felt like you needed to overcome sort of at the outset to be able to bring this to life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, but the initial challenge that we thought we had to face was, well, why would someone do a payment on Web3 rails on blockchain if getting, for example, an asset like a digital dollar like USDC was so expensive and difficult? The fees could be, I've seen fees like with providers like being 9% of your purchase, like you go to the provider and then you receive, USDC. And it's like, well, hold on, that's more than an FX rate. That's more than, the 3% that they might take from merchants in a purchase. So why would anyone use this for utility if the barrier or the friction is so high? So that was what we thought was the big challenge. Like, okay, well, let's bring down the fees of ramps, and then we thought, oh, well, if we added that with, the great user experience of a wallet, that would solve the problem. And to a degree, it is what we need to do. But what we discovered was there was a whole range of things like trust that we had to fight with this industry, and that goes to the narrative of what this industry is about.
Trust with the consumer, or trust with regulators, or all trust?
Good question. I think the regulators care about the trust of the consumers, and I think it plays hand in hand. It has one is not without the other. So it's both, and that's why I think like narratives of an industry are so important, and of a technology are actually the bigger hidden challenge for everyone. We can build any sort of technology, we can create any ramp, we can create any wallet, but what we can't do is change narratives as easily as maybe just building something with code.
Yeah, I think that's the opportunity and the biggest challenge. Way back in the early days of the web, I'll say that for me, I wasn't one of those super users who at the outset was like very willing to like give a bunch of information into it. I was like, I don't know where this is all going to go. And I was spending lots of my time trying to understand the privacy dynamics, the dynamics of like, the security methodology, what goes through the URL, all those kinds of things. And it took me a while to get comfortable. And one of the things we're asking people to do is sort of understand this new technology and then work with it. And I think part of, maybe it was just a total side note, but I was on this boat a couple of weeks ago that was like going crazy in the water, and it was like open, it was in the ocean, and it was like bouncing really high, and it was really scary. And the captain looked at me and he's like, you seem very calm. And I was like, I'm trusting the process, and I'm trusting the parts here. I'm trusting the mechanism's going to work. And we kind of need people to not be so focused on the crypto side of it and the blockchain side of it, and to trust a little bit of the process. That's what we're asking them to do as they engage with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I definitely think trusting the process is the way to go, and we need to do that. But there is this part of me that feels that, also being an advocate and fighting for the process is making it happen, maybe when not many other people are going to do that, is a really important piece of the puzzle too. Having a voice for maybe those who aren't heard enough, I think is critical in this. And maybe that's just the builder in me saying that, like, I'm not going to wait for someone or the process to take place. I'm going to go and create it and make sure that it happens with everything that I can do, and whoever I can muster up to join me in doing that.
And then you need to make it simple enough, compelling enough, solve a problem so that the consumers will then trust the process and trust the tech stack.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely you need to make sure you're solving a problem for sure. But then again, like, as I mentioned before, what we thought the problem was like the challenges that we had to face was just solving the problem, UX, ramps, these type of things. But part of the problem is, who's telling the stories about these problems being solved? Who's making the ground fertile for change? Who is actually driving the narrative? That really matters. And if the narrative is hijacked by the loudest in the room, then it affects those who are perhaps doing good work for others and solving real problems, if that makes sense.
No, I totally understand that. And that's part of the reason why I think about the work that we do here at the SDF and that I spend a lot of time doing is that really perfect trifecta of policy, technology, and business, and understanding the impacts of technology and business. And then the policy piece is really important. And so helping to be the voice in the room, telling stories about what builders like you are doing, I think is a really, really important part of what we do. And I think others who get to be at the table need to really tell the stories of the people that are actually on the ground. Which sort of brings me to the next question for you, which is sort of like, what's next? There's so many people out there in the world that are faced with these similar challenges, like limited access to financial institutions or limited access to being able to get access to even fiat. And the risks associated with having cash on hand are so severe. I know we've spent a bunch of time talking about this in the past. So where do we go from here to expand the impact and help those people?
Yeah, I think this is the big question. I have recently been talking to and seeing a lot of user stories, and I've gained like a really strong conviction, stronger than ever before, that and I'm part of this, need to be a voice for those who don't necessarily have a voice or who aren't able to access, the seat at the table. Like giving examples, recently we saw, people trying to pay employees with cash, for example, in Colombia. And a friend of mine, he was doing this, and because he couldn't invest his money from the US to build his businesses, his manufacturing, his virtual assistant businesses, and other investments he was making. He was using all cash, and he got shot, and he actually died. He was revived, fortunately, after a few days. But he was out. He had an afterlife experience and everything. But it just went to show that there are real risks of holding cash as a bag of cash to do business, especially in places with high risk. And this is all, the need of cash is often because of a broken financial system, and maybe also just people not having access to these sort of payment systems because of past history of violence, or just the lack of development of the banking rails and things like that. And this is just one story that I've seen recently. We're seeing others with refugees, and I know that Stella's really big on that. And this has sort of just fallen into us by, I don't know, just life. And we've seen, money delivered through, for example, the MoneyGram partnership with Stella to places that, is really difficult to get money into. And, there's a real benefit of having it on blockchain because it's instant, which previously sending money to these regions in the Middle East were, take 3 days, and sometimes the money would be returned another 3 days, and then be 20, big 20% fees, and then maybe fees for returning. And now we know, especially when there's really sensitive situations, that the speed that you can get from blockchain, and the lack of the fees and the ease, and it really matters. It actually goes to saving people's lives. And this for me was an aha moment, and it made me realize, like, well, hold on, this is no longer about just like building a photo sharing service or something like that. This is about people's lives. And when I saw what was at stake, it changed everything for me. And then I realized this is a big deal. We really need to fight for people's lives here. And these people aren't going to have like a voice. So if you see this, you can't stay quiet. You can't just not try and fight to make sure that people recognize the utility, people recognize the problem it's solving, and specifically who it's helping, and why it matters, and why this can't just be looked over, and it's not just another thing like a speculation or a gambling, sort of platform. It's something that really, really helps people, and there's no other no other technology that can do or help in specific cases.
I think it's so when I talk to you and when I talk to builders like you, and when I go to these parts of the world that are very different from where I'm sitting right now, I'm in the United States. And when I think about the United States and I try to have these discussions with people here, it's harder unless you've actually experienced what it's like in a country where there's lack of access to capital and there's an inability to even be a part of the financial infrastructure, and that receiving money from outside of that country is near damn impossible. And that this solution, not only is it the speed, but it's also the autonomy of the individual holding and maintaining control of their assets on their own. There's so much of it that I think gets lost in the narratives that we talk about in the United States and maybe in most of the West, because we don't, maybe not everybody understands the impact and the challenges that it makes. So I'm really grateful for people like you and your team who spend their time really focusing on that and also brings those stories to us, because I think without that, we would be spending a lot of time in the United States, for example, talking about the trading use case, which I'm not saying is invaluable to some, but it's not the reason why I got into the space.
True. And like I said, the trading use case is a real use case, and freedom with what to do with what you want with your money is I think really important and really empowering for a lot of people. But also, the stories of getting money to people just to help security, save lives, to help them have access. Like we did some interviews recently with the women that were getting paid in the mountains of Colombia. And one thing that they said, which just struck me, is like nothing I would ever think about. It was great for them to get paid, hold dollars to protect themselves from inflation, and be able to cash out with great FX rates whenever they want, and in remote locations where there's no banks and payment systems. Like that's all amazing. But one thing that they said, which I just never thought about, was they said, well, we feel like we're a part of the world and the movement of the world and the technology and what's going forward in progress. And we've never felt that before. And for me, I didn't even think of just feeling a part of progress, feeling like having an application where they get to use the latest technology and feeling connected to the world in a place where no one ever cares about them. That's the last place a bank would ever invest or technologists. And for them to sort of feel this was, I don't know, just an interesting discovery that I'd never thought about before. And so that was just an interesting insight.
Well, I love that. And it just makes me smile, because that's exactly what I think the empowerment is. Empowerment in having autonomy, empowerment in having connections, empowerment in feeling like you're a part of something is exactly the kind of things that we want to bring about in the world. I want to tweak a question from one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Wiser Than Me. What do you wish that you could go back and tell yourself before you started Decaf?
I mean, probably a lot of things. Probably a lot of things. I mean, let's the biggest challenge about being in this space is that we're in crypto, and we've had to dodge landmines left, right, center through this journey to even be existing now, and not have gone down with all the landmines that we've had to navigate is a miracle, because there were stable coins, exchanges, I don't know, custody solutions. There were banking as a service providers. There were banks that have just all blown up, and there were improper actors as well. There were a lot of people in the crypto space and predators, to be honest, and the whole way of thinking about this industry has evolved so much. It's crazy how much things can change within a week in this space. And any founder in this space will tell you the same thing probably. So I guess the thing I would say is, internet cut out? No. Did my internet cut out? Sorry.
You're still there.
Oh, okay.
The thing you would
Yeah,
say,
I guess the advice. Oh yeah, what I would say is, just be wise. stick to your principles and morals, even if it doesn't make sense early on, like why to be a non-custodial wallet when everyone else is a centralized exchange, and everyone's telling you that's the right way to go, and the whole market sort of goes in one direction and you choose to go another. And stick to the principles and values that you have, and care about your end users and what you should be doing. At the end of the day, like it gets like kind of lonely at times and dark, but
Oh, I know.
but eventually it makes sense. But people don't remember all the pain you have to go through to get there.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I think that even if you told yourself that, I'm not sure that would have brought you to recognize that you're going to see all the things that we saw over the last 3 years in crypto. But I do think that it would have been nice to get a little bit of an indicator of yourself maybe 5 years ago, so you could have at least been more prepared. Well, Rick, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the work that you and the team at Decaf do. I think it is something it's an application that I like to talk about. The use that you focus on is something that's really important to us at the SDF, and personally, it's really important to me. So thank you for doing the work that you do, and thank you so much for coming on Block by Block.
Yeah, and thank you for the advocacy work, and thank you for spreading the good word. I think it's so important, and I'd love to hear about what you're doing and help however we can, because I think it's so important.
Thank you. You already do. Your use is like super important. Oh, wait. Oh, that's right. I'm going to ask you one more question. The last question that I'm going to ask you is, where can people follow up with you and follow up with Decaf?
Yeah, well, our website is decaf.so, and on Twitter we keep as updated as possible, so you can find us at decaf_so. That's that. You can follow us on Twitter or X. Sorry.
I still can't get that right either. All right. Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Denelle.
Thanks for tuning in today. This was a great conversation with Rick about how the challenges you think you need to solve at the outset might not be the ones that you'll actually face once you're up and running, and how you have to stay focused on delivering for the end user. And we need to tell those user stories of how the technology is changing and in some cases saving people's lives. A big takeaway for me was his story of the woman in Colombia that told him that they felt part of the rest of the world as they use this new technology. We'll continue these topics in our next conversation with Women's World Banking CEO, Mary Ellen Iskandarian. That episode of Mary Ellen, our second in this mini-series on how to make a real-world impact, will be released on August 22nd. So, until then, thank you for listening to Block by Block, and be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released, and follow me on X or LinkedIn to stay in the loop in between episodes. I'll talk to you next time.